You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. All right. Thank you for tuning in to a very special edition of the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. We have a very special guest that is going to come on, someone that hasn't talked to the media yet, that was right there behind that AGR building. And I think he's going to bring some very good information that's going to change a lot of people's perspective of these events. And folks, this is one of the most important stories in our nation's history. We have a government, for whatever reason, are clearly concealing information and holding information from the American people, because I think we have a government now that has absolute contempt for we the people and the idea that we want to hold them accountable as it should be, as that this country was founded to work. They think they owe you nothing. We're going to bring Kurt on here in just a second. I'm going to play a quick video that shows you his perspective. But we're going to talk, he and I are going to talk, and then toward the end, we're going to open up the floor to make sure that you guys get in here and ask him questions too. This is your interview. Continue to share, like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, all those good things. Now they got all that self-promotion out of the way. What I want to do, folks, is actually, I'm going to show you a quick video from Kurt's perspective, and then we're going to bring him on. I'm going to let him introduce himself and share his story.
Down.
All right, threat one is down. Threat one is down. What do you got?
Threat one is down.
You got visual? Okay. No, just...
You all can see just how close he actually was.
I am literally right between where Trump was and the shooter.
All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring on Kurt. He can share his story, and let's see what he has to say. Let's see what he saw, and Kurt, welcome.
Hey, Gary. Good to see you.
You as well. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on today, Kurt, and just sharing your story, that firsthand accounts. I think there's a lot of stuff that people are looking at. I'll just leave it there. Kurt, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of go right into it. And without me, I don't know, kind of leading you or doing anything, I just want to hear exactly in your own words what took place that day.
Yeah, no problem. So 20 plus year resident of Butler County. We're a somewhat rural, but also somewhat affluent suburb of the north of Pittsburgh. Again, suburbs. So Butler County, simply put, is Trump country. We went red in the last several elections, and that crowd there can kind of support that alone. That day was interesting in that I my wife and some of my really close personal friends were inside that rally. I had a prior commitment that got me home a little bit earlier that day than I was expecting. So I figured it was a beautiful day. I'm going to jump on my motorcycle and take a ride up and just take in the area. And when I got somewhat close, I actually hit one of those Trump swag tents that you all have seen everywhere. And as I was making a purchase, I remarked that I could actually see the rally pretty clearly, across the street and in the back of a grassy area. And so I drove my bike over there, and there was a barricade at the driveway entrance, just sort of a normal sawhorse type barricade with a couple of cones on either side. But decided I'm just going to kind of wheel my bike around that, and I could see folks along the fence line, and pulled back there. There were no cars in the lot at the time, and parked my bike right up next to the AGR building there, kept it out of the sun in the shade, and went along the fence line. As I got off my bike, you could hear, I forget the song, but you could hear Trump's entry music, right, that you hear at all his rallies. And so again, that goes to when I got there. And as everybody's seen in the timeline of events, the shooting took place anywhere, 5 to 10 minutes into the actual rally, right? Into the actual Trump speaking. And there was probably no more than about 15 yards of grassy space between that AGR building and the fence line. And so was watching from right on the fence line and was just remarking at the police presence, both, plainclothes, tactical clothes, and just typical PA state trooper gear, facing us. And at some point, a lot of binoculars started going up on their side facing us toward the AGR building. And again, seconds later, they started making a move toward us. And as they got about halfway, and from their position to the fence line was probably no more than 100 yards. So when they got about 50 yards from their position towards us, they started yelling, on the roof. And I think even think I heard through some of the video accounts that he's on the roof, he's got a gun. And so I turned to look, and in the seconds that ensued thereafter, I recall seeing a blur at the roof line, right at the peak of that roof line. And then seconds later, there were, the shots went out. And, we all know that there were about 7 or 8 rounds fired from the roof. And I guess after a few of those, I just kind of made myself small, didn't take cover, but just got down. And when I heard those gunshots cease, I looked up, I stood up, and I clearly saw, his face, right? He was probably pushing himself up from that prone shooting position. And as his silhouette, if you will, dropped below the roof line, then came the one round from the counter sniper. And I didn't see, again, his figure was below the roof line at that moment in time, that second in time. But I saw what I was describing and described in my FBI interview as kind of a burst, a puff of feathers, which, in hindsight, now that it was his hair flying. And so again, from the moment of that first round to the last takeout round was probably only about 6 seconds. But effectively, that's what I saw. And then that video that you showed, Gary, was me taking cover behind the trees, just to the shooter's left of his position. And then I just started recording. So yeah, that was it really, from the moment I pulled onto the scene to the moment you saw those videos. It was probably all told, 10 minutes total from the moment I saw, that vantage point from that Trump swag tent across the street until I recorded those videos. It was probably no more than, like I said, 8-10 minutes. Yeah,
that's insane. And again, what's one of the things that we can talk about government conspiracy and all those things. And again, I'm happy to entertain a lot of those ideas, maybe not in the way that most people think, but what's crazy is that we haven't heard your story on national news. There's been very little eyewitness reports, especially from right there at the AGR building. That's what's been nuts. And then, we had John on last night, John Malice, and, he even said, when he did go on even Fox News with Martha McCallum and a couple of other media sources and media outlets, he tried to talk for 10, 15 minutes and they played, 2 minutes of what he was talking about. And then, he said, he even felt they were clearly trying to push a certain narrative. And, again, I think it's an absolute disgrace that your story and other people and some freaking little YouTuber like me has to get a hold of you to tell the American people this story. One of the things that, when they were yelling, he's got a gun, I'm interested. Do you think that Crooks would have heard the police saying that, or anyone saying that?
It's hard to say what he would have heard.
Sure.
Just merely considering the distance from those police that were rushing towards him, and where he was positioned. It was probably no more than 20 yards. right? So in that sense, he could have heard that. You could tell by that.
Like we were talking about, he definitely knew that law enforcement was aware of him, that he had a gun, because we had that one law enforcement officer actually, get up onto the roof, or, pull himself, his head above the roof, and then Crooks pointed a gun at him. So, from right there, it was kind of game on for him. One of the things that I think people are really interested to hear is, that we hear all the time, one of the predominant threats is the second shooter theory. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And I'll give you guys my opinion on that, whether you like it or not. But was there any indication to you that, did you hear, did you see gunshots coming from any other location? Was there any indication at the time to you that there was a second shooter, or shots were coming from a different location?
No, none whatsoever. Again, in that probably 5-6 seconds of gunfire, I was in the same position, right? As soon as I heard those, initial 3 to 5 rounds go off, I hunkered down in place, made myself small, and then stood back up in that 6-second window where between the first shot and then the shot that took him out. I saw muzzle fire, or a muzzle flash, right? Heard that muzzle fire, and I didn't hear anything come from another direction. Now, in that video I showed, and others you've seen from that same perspective, my perspective, you saw law enforcement up against the window or up against the building, kind of sheltering themselves from the window. There was a lot of discussion about, either he's in the window or watch the window. I saw nothing. I mean, they were closed windows, right? It wasn't even an ajar window, let alone an open window. So there was no indication that anything came from below that shooter position. I've seen and heard on your channel and others, assertions that somebody was on the water tower. Saw no evidence of that. I thought your coverage of that was particularly good, given the railing measurements and kind of taking that same scale to whether that's an antenna or whatever that structure was on top of the water tower.
Vent.
Yeah. So no indication that anything came from there. I will say that it was either when I was in the tree line or when we were told we were told to take cover in those police cruisers at one point after that time where I shot that video, where they thought that there could be somebody inside that building. They put us, for our own protection, inside those police cruisers. And I heard on the radio both discussion about evidence found inside, fresh blood in a bathroom was what I recall. And then there was also chatter about the water tower, right? That they, investigate the water tower. There's somebody around the water tower. So I'm not saying that there was somebody around the water tower. I was saying that there was chatter that there, I guess, could be somebody around that water tower. But again, to your question, no evidence that there was another shooter that
Now, were you close enough, or, when you were looking, I don't know if your head was down or whatever else, but did you see actual muzzle flash or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, it was obviously a bright day, right? A bright sunny day. That's a white roof, on a somewhat bright white blue background. And again, in the split instant in time, I saw a muzzle flash, right? I mean, it wasn't dark, it wasn't twilight, so it was bright daylight. But it was unmistakable.
In line with the muzzle.
Yeah, I was probably no more than 5 degrees off his target line.
That's
just to what I would say would be his left.
So from your perspective, I think it's safe to say at this point, from every indication is, he got off 8 shots. You feel like every single one of those 8 shots, from the first 3 to the last 5, you feel like, well, let me ask, did you see those? Do you feel like it was clear that they was coming from him, between muzzle flash and sound and everything else?
Yeah. I mean, I clearly saw and heard, multiple rounds fired from that roof, from that weapon that I saw that flash come from. you try to convince yourself of this or talk yourself out of something else. I'm not going to try to do that. As far as unequivocally 8 rounds I saw and heard, I can't say that, right?
Sure.
Because it just happened so quickly. But because, what I've seen since that day, again, particularly in your coverage with the sound waves that accompanied the sounds of those rounds being fired, and the time at which they were shot, I'm sure they were all 8.
Well,
Or at least I believe they were all 8. I can't be sure.
So, let me think. The one of the prevailing theories is that we have a trained sniper or at least someone else shooting the first 3 rounds, and then basically we have Crooks acting as a patsy to basically cover his exfil, his exit. Right. I'm curious. Did you see? And I know while this is going on, you're not counting rounds. You're not saying, "Oh, there's 3 and then there's 5," and I completely get that. Did you feel like that you saw at least, muzzle flash from the first 3, and then also at least some sort of muzzle flash from the subsequent 5, exactly from that location?
It's interesting the way you framed that sort of lead into that question. I as I'm thinking about it and listening to what you were again framing, there's no question in my mind that those first 3, right, which were pretty close to each other, and then there was a brief pause, and then the burst of several more. I heard both sets of shots and saw flash from both sets of shots, right? Whether it was exactly 8 that I saw and heard, I can't be 100% sure, but based on what I've seen in the coverage and what I've heard, yeah, I mean, I'm 95, 98+% sure that all of those came from that position. And look, I kind of tend to agree with you on, certainly the negligence that was evident on that day. Whether there's another shooter, I mean, I'm not going to go there. I have no reason to believe there was. I have more reason to believe that there was not, again, based on what I saw and heard personally. And then again, some supporting information that I've seen since then, that kind of reinforces what I remember seeing and hearing, leads me to believe that all those shots came from that same shooter.
Absolutely. Interesting. Yeah. I know not everybody was here during the introduction. What we're going to do, I'm going to continue to talk to Kurt at the end of this, or towards the end. We'll definitely make room for you guys to ask some questions. And again, if you guys want to prioritize your question, there's over 1,300 people on this right now. Again, a super chat, we'll make sure that we get you in there. We'll prioritize that, but we also will try to get other people in there that are just asking questions. But kind of want to get through, again, just talk to Kurt and we'll get to your questions. The other thing is be respectful over in those comments. If you're going to be a jackass over in the comments, I'm put you in a timeout. And then if you come back and there's still a jackass, you're getting banned. It's just simple as that. Yeah. So the other thing too is that we've heard a lot about is that lower level. Again, all those, with the people being out there, and it, from my perspective, that building is in a defilade, right? It's in a depression. Do you think that there would even be a line of sight that would be clear between the people being out there and, there's a chain link fence right there? Do you think there's any possibility, was there any indication that any rounds came from that lower level, any of those windows or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. And I've actually given that some thought, right? Since you and I talked, real briefly yesterday about that second shooter from the windows or well below the roofline position. And the more I think about that actual, the topography of the land, I do recall a bit of a depression from the building to the fence, right? A little bit of a dip and then back up. I can't say for certain from my recollection. And when I went back, 48 hours later to claim my Harley, because it was, they kind of kept it there. And under that investigative scene, I didn't get around the back of the building, right? There was still some heavy state police presence there 48 hours after the incident. But I do recall that it would be hard, from my recollection, to be able to even see Trump from that position, let alone, to your point, right, get him in the sights and take shots, because we were all still along that fence line. I mean, it wasn't packed. There was probably, from the width of that AGR building on that fence line, no more than 50 people, right, dispersed across about maybe a 75, 100 foot span of that fence. And then to the side where I was, which was, toward that parking lot side of the building, there were a few more people, right, compared to the other side of the AGR building, in the opposite of the parking lot, because we could see straight through. I mean, I could literally see Trump's figure. Oddly enough, it was people were asking, how can you see him? And there you saw a red combine, right, farm tractor, if you will, on what would have been his stage right. And right where the chute of the combine, points down, he was directly below that, right? So it was a really clear way to say, oh, he's right there. But again, we were, standing up. So I'm 5'10", and presumably slightly up from upgrade from where the building would have been. And so, and I could just see him, right? Just see him over the crowd and below that combine chute. So the idea that angle from a window and getting a shot there, I mean, I'd love to go back and look from that perspective. But of course, everything that was at the fairgrounds, right where the rally was, is gone. So you really can't even orient yourself, other than those three buildings that were in the back of the stage. But yeah, no, I don't think you could have seen him from there.
No, I definitely plan on going back up there. I want to make some contact with some of the local Butler, whether it be sheriff's office or PD, and actually go up to the roof, take a look at that. I'd love to, hopefully we can coordinate where we can meet up there and you can kind of talk us through on site, what happened.
Sure.
But, I also, one of the things that just looking at a topographical map, I can tell that, and that was one of the things that I looked at last night, number one, that building is in a depression, and that's it's not a very tall building. And then of course the roof of that is there's very little slope to that roof. And then, Trump being 6'3", he was on at least a 5-foot pedestal. So, I think it's very likely that there's very little elevation change between the top of that roof and where Trump was. It's a lot less than the people think. And the other thing, I think a lot of the footage that we're seeing is very deceptive. It makes everything, as a wide angle cameras do, which is exactly what's on everybody's phone, makes everything look a lot further than it is. Folks, 140 yards is not far. Like, you can see very clear detail at 140 yards. The other thing I think is also a little deceptive is how far that water tower is. Actually looking on the map, I kind of from the AGR building to that water tower, that's another thing I think is very deceptive. It looks like it's much further away than it is. I mean, that water tower is pretty darn close. You can see very good detail from just looking at the distances. Know what I know about distances. You would be able to see very good detail if there's somebody up on that water tower. Would you agree with that assessment? Or?
Yeah, I would. And that's obviously a very high vantage point from on top of that water tower, or even on the sort of the catwalk around it. But even the orientation of the water tower from the AGR building, and then even to the fairgrounds, the stage of the fairgrounds area. And I know that I believe there were bleachers behind the president. And so I got to think, from that high vantage point, you would have been able to see, but it's almost behind him, right? Yeah. Directly behind him. So even if there were a shooter up there and a shot came from there, and it missed, it would have hit somebody from that downward trajectory. It would have hit somebody in the first couple rows of the audience, right?
Well, I think there's also what people don't realize now is that, that big billboard that Trump was looking at, I think there's, again, you guys can go check out some of the stuff on Mike Bell's channel. I definitely recommend you go follow him. I think he takes a very scientific and good approach. He's an engineer. He's in South Africa, but I think, he lays out pretty clearly based on the height of the height of the tower, the angles of that billboard would have actually obstructed any sort of view coming from the water tower to Trump. And at the end of the day, look, I think there's a whether you're looking at trajectories or you're looking at any of the sound analysis that's been done, there's room for error, right? And I've gotten things wrong on here. I've tried to correct those. Like, we are all speculating. There's a lot of speculation that goes on, and we're doing the best we can. And that's what I want to do, right? We're going to get some things wrong. There's a lot of information that's constantly coming out. And it is what it is. But I think if we're earnest and sincere about looking for the truth, then we're not looking for evidence that's going to confirm or deny, or not going to confirm the theories that we like and things like that. And, going back to the second shooter theory, it would be more believable to me that there was a second shooter if Trump wasn't still alive. That's my big problem with this theory, is that we have, the idea that we have this patsy that's taken the fall, but, the first 3 rounds is, this trained shooter, this deep state government agent. Let me tell you something. If that is the case, if we have this deep state government agent that was supposed to be able to shoot at 140 yards, which is a chip shot, folks, with a decent rifle, decent ammunition, honestly, even with iron sights, it's a pretty easy shot. Well, that guy really screwed the pooch. All right. If that's true, he's probably dead somewhere because he sucks. So what you're saying to me is that we have 2 shooters that suck. And, I just don't buy that. I have a real hard time. And what I do think is a real government conspiracy is the fact that I do think that Trump was intentionally denied resources. I think they understood the threat. I think anybody with any common sense can sit back and say, hey, look, Trump needs additional security over most people. He is one of the most loved and hated people in America. I don't care who you are. He's a threat to democracy. He's Hitler. If he wins again, the republic is gone. Democracy has been killed. There's been so much rhetoric pushed toward Trump that it's insane. And it's not even just toward Trump. It's also his supporters. That's the sad thing is, anybody that is wearing a red hat that says MAGA, Make America Great Again, automatically by the left is considered a loon. And that's just not how things work. What else did you see, Kurt?
Yeah, that's really it, Gary. I can confirm, from one of the state police plainclothes investigative guys that I was talking to really late in the night, right? As I said, they held, I say held, but that the FBI asked us to stay, informed us we weren't detained, that we saw a lot, right? Had to hang around for a good 3 or 4 hours afterwards, waiting for teams of FBI to come and teams of 2 to interview everybody. By the time they released me, it was probably around 10 p.m. But as I said, I'd given one of the state troopers my license, when we were still in the tree line. And so I wanted that back. I knew I wasn't going to get my motorcycle back that night, but I wanted my driver's license back. And one of the state guys that I was talking to had confirmed that story that everybody's likely or most have heard now, where they buddy lifted each other onto the roof, distracted crooks, right? Guy pushed himself back. I had heard that he had actually broken his ankle on the fall, but I can most certainly confirm that was what I heard that night from one of the state police. So I'm not sure you and I talked about that, Gary, but other than that, that the videos that you've seen is everything that I've seen. I think that, and I forget the handle of the guy that video from, really where I was. I forget who that was, but I'm convinced more now than ever that he was among one of the 7 that I was with that was, sheltering in the tree line, moved to the police cruisers, then moved across the street and then over to the farm fairground building where we all waited for those interviews. There, interestingly enough, you'll see some of in one of those video recaps, there's an insert put in at the very end that I think it shows the guy who was video recording, but from a different angle running across the field. There was a Sheetz employee, right? He had the black Sheetz ball cap. He had the red Sheetz shirt on that. And there's a Sheetz right across the street from where this happened. And the kid said he just got off work and he saw the crowd and he figured, well, I'm going to come over and take it all in. And he was among the 7 with me that were held there for interview, and his phone was taken, right? He actually had a knife on him that was also taken. He was also at a very odd angle. He was effectively, behind the shooter at the time. He was sort of taken into custody by the police. He was actually cuffed and put down on the ground. I think because he was recording, the law enforcement and, that was standing above the deceased crooks. Right. And it was almost like, what are you doing in that position? Now, meanwhile, the guy just ran for cover when the shots were fired. Everybody pretty much scattered. I stayed in those tree lines. For what reason? I don't know. I just stayed there as opposed to running away. But that guy, I think because he ran away kind of behind the scene and kept recording, he was a lot more suspicious than those of us that were just hunkered down in the trees. Like almost like maybe he could have been part of, with the shooter, right? Almost recording the shooter from behind. But again, that kid was in the tree line with me at the very beginning and then ran. And then by the time he was spotted by the law enforcement on the roof, that's when I actually heard him say, it pointed to the guy, that guy right there, black hat, red shirt, detain him, right? Only because he was recording after the fact from a questionable angle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, that's pretty much everything I've seen. And having told this story more than a few times now, there's really not much else to share.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. What we'll do, folks, is we'll start taking some questions here. I have a couple of comments and questions saved. Let me throw those up. Number one, again, super thanks. We appreciate you guys helping support the channel. Kurt, how fast, let me put this up here. Kurt, how fast did the FBI show up afterwards? And is that a normal amount of time? Excuse me. And did they try to confiscate everyone's phone footage? Yeah.
So, I know by the time I made it to the farm building, right? That had to be a good 35 to 40 minutes after the shooting. And there was an FBI agent. He had introduced himself from the Pittsburgh field office. And he was the one that really clearly stated from the onset, you're not being detained. But you guys were, clearly you saw something. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Kind of invoked patriotism, right? We'd like you to stay, be a patriot, let us interview you so we can understand what you saw and heard. And please don't talk to each other while you're in this holding room about what you saw, because, what person A says can influence what person B remembers and vice versa. So, now, I will tell you that it was probably a good 2 hours after that before I'm recalling about 3 to 4 teams of 2 FBI agents each that were conducting the interviews, right? So somebody would come to the doorway and say, how about you? Can you come with us? And then, I know from my own interview that they just brought me outside, away from distraction and away from others being interviewed. And there were 2 people. One was asking questions, and the other was, observing and writing down answers. And it was just the typical stuff. What's your name, date of birth, where do you live, and then what did you see? And that was it. There was very little sort of Q&A, right, back and forth, other than please tell us what you saw.
Interesting.
So, how long did it, so again, that the time in which it took multiple FBI agents to arrive at that building where we were, waiting was a couple of hours. And I think that they were just calling in people. I know from talking to the state law enforcement, really mainly so I guess they would have been detectives, investigators, because they were in plain clothes. Those guys were talking about coming from all over. They weren't just from the Butler barracks. They were from all over Western PA. And additionally, I mean, I don't know. I think every possible uniformed law enforcement was on that scene, because I saw, parked police vehicles, right? And I saw several different local borough jurisdiction vehicles, and then of course state police and several different federal agencies represented there. So yeah, that's it. Not a long time. FBI was definitely on the scene before I got to that building, but enough to be there to conduct all those interviews in a timely process. I think there were probably about 15 of us that were in that conference room waiting, and about half and half from where I was over at the AGR, and then the other half were from inside the rally.
Interesting. I want to throw up some comments and kind of address some of the stuff that's kind of being said. Radio chatter said Overwatch was on the tower on body cam from roof. Look, I kind of know what you're talking about in there. What people need to realize is that Overwatch, that term, is used as both a noun and a verb. Very commonly used both in the military and law enforcement. When we say, hey, I have Overwatch on a target or a threat, meaning I have eyes on that, I'm looking at that. That does not necessarily mean that, hey, we have people in a position on the tower. There's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever, folks. Like, there is plenty of footage now that shows clear footage of that tower. I played it. There's nobody on that tower. There's no indication of anybody on the tower. There's nobody that saw anything on the tower. I keep hearing about these crazy things, like there was a zip line on a tower and people saw somebody zipping down. Like, folks, I really believe that there is a government push for disinformation. If you understand how the intelligence community works, look, I think it's a state-sponsored effort to delegitimize this entire conversation so that anybody, whether they're a politician or the person on the street, starts talking about any sort of theory, it is automatically shut down because people are believing stuff like this that we have no evidence for. And speaking of which, this is another one that really irks me. The first shot was dead on. No, it wasn't. It missed him. Nicked him on the ear. Only missed due to the last second hit turn. Okay. Second shot hit the chest. Folks, there is most protectees. Matter of fact, okay, most protectees are not wearing any body armor. If Trump was wearing body armor that day, it would have been soft armor. All right, that is called level 3A. All right, it is not going to stop a rifle round. Those are for pistol rounds only. Clearly he wasn't wearing plates. He wasn't wearing a level 4 body armor that is going to stop any sort of rifle round, much less. There's a good possibility, because it's one of the most prolific types of 5.56 or 223 ammo out there, that, this shooter was using M855 green tip. So it's a penetrator round that would zip through any sort of body armor, soft body armor out there. Agent's name is Greg. Greg shot the first 3 rounds. Well, Greg sucks. All right. So if that's true, look, folks, I can tell you right now, at 140 yards, it is absolutely possible for a target to get lucky and you might miss a shot. Look, I'm a former sniper, former Green Beret, been on hundreds of sniper and recon missions, did 4 combat tours. I'm telling you right now, the idea that, snipers are always one shot, one kill, that's not true. You often need a follow-up shot, and we are trained to have follow-up shots. And anybody that would be tasked to do this mission, there was plenty of time from the time that we had that first round, Trump reached up to his ear. If that was me on the gun, all right, I would have shot him again. I would have followed that shot up before any sort of protective detail got to him. So that idea to me is a little bit crazy. Drone space cleared after 5 p.m. if you believe Secret Service. A lot of stuff on the drone side of that. Yeah. So this guy says, George McMillan says, Mike Bell does a great 3D modeling, but lacks any understanding of American politics. So you're right, George. I agree with that, which I think leaves, gives him some more credibility. He's looking at this objectively, not taking into all of the idea, all the political theater that goes on in this country, and just saying, hey, look, these are the facts. One of the things I'll tell you folks, if I wanted to get 3 times as many views, and this goes for Mike Bell as well, if you want to get a lot more views on this, start pushing the second shooter theory. I get all kinds of hate comments over the fact that I just am not buying into the second shooter theory. I'm open to it, but it would be much more advantageous if I was willing to promote that, and anybody out there that wants views. And quite frankly, I think there's a lot of channels out there that understand this, and they're doing it just for that reason. So take that for what it's worth. Suzanne Williams, sir, thank you for all your guests and information you have provided since finding your page. Have gone back and reviewed all. One of the things I definitely would recommend to everybody, if you haven't seen the first video that we put out on this, was my interview with a former counter sniper from Secret Service. He breaks down, he's done many advances all over the world during election years and everything else. He talks to some of the inner workings of Secret Service. I think it will give you a different perspective. He does not defend the Secret Service, just the opposite. Knowing what he knows, he thinks that there were some major failures. And I think that's true. And I'm not defending the Secret Service either. So again, I think that's important to know what's going on there. Thank you for all your work on this no second shooter. However, there is more to this. I don't doubt that, Frank. I absolutely believe that. I 100% believe that. So we'll look at some other questions here. All right. So this is something that I've been exploring. We talked about quite a bit last night. Why do the first 3 shots sound different on several mics? Here, I'm going to give you my theory on this. And again, I'm not an audio engineer. I know suddenly everybody out there is now has like a PhD in audio engineering. Every single person in the comments, they know so much about audio. But my thought on this is that, again, when he is shooting with those initial first 3 shots, he is over the ridge line of that roof. And by the way, I'm trying real hard to get an audio engineer on here. And I'm open to being completely wrong on all of this. But my thoughts on this, as someone that I film shooting for a living, right? Like we do a lot of gun videos. That's, what this channel has always been about, training videos. And I know that we start angling the gun in different locations, pointing into different locations, changing minor things, changing the way that the ejection port is facing a camera or a microphone. It changes the audio. Or we start shooting really fast. We go from slow aim fire to rapid fire. Like you are clipping that mic, you're shoving a bunch of sound waves that the mic is trying to process, and things change. But one of my theories on this is that, and this is pure speculation, and maybe Kurt can confirm or deny some of this, but as we're shooting over the top of that ridge line, we're bouncing sound off a resonator that is pushing sound, the rooftop, by the way. So it's pushing sound one way. If he now sees that Trump is down and all he's down trying to do is kill as many people as possible, or there's even we don't know where those 5 rounds went. He could have seen law enforcement off to a flank, and he could have even pointed that rifle to the left or to the right, and put down suppressive fire because he saw law enforcement peeking around the tops of the roof. Because on certain, number one, almost on both sides of that, from what I can tell, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kurt, if you move back far enough from the edges of that roof, you can essentially see the top of that roof I know from the left side as we're looking at it, because I've seen pictures of, people taking photos, and that's where that photo of Crooks laying in the prone came from. It came from that far left side, which was elevated, and you can actually see the roof. And you could probably see some sort of, you can probably get a sight of him. And from what is going on, and number one, Crooks already knew law enforcement was there because he pointed a gun at him. He probably knew that they were peeking around the edges of the roof looking for him. I don't know where those first 5 rounds went, but I do know if we pull that muzzle back off that front side of that roof, that is resonating out this way, and we pull it back, and now we're on this side of the roof, and it's resonating back and bouncing sound off that back building, to me, that would probably change the sound. I don't know. I'm not an audio engineer. I'd love to get one on here and take a look at this, take a critical, objective look at this. So, that's my thought. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to be on with Chris Martinson this afternoon. I know that he has a completely different take on that. So, again, that's the truth, but that's what I think. I think we need something more than just audio to come to a conclusion that there is more than two shooters. I think there's probably some error in the audio analysis that we're not seeing. But again, I don't know. So there's that. Now I lost this comment, so I can remove it. There it is. Oh, and I actually wanted to ask you that, Kurt. Did you see, or did you have any indication that the first 3 rounds, did it look like the rifle was in a different position from those other follow-on 5 rounds? Excuse me.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't recall. And I would say I don't think so. Right. Just again, in hindsight, based on the time from the first to the 8th, right? Setting aside for a moment that last shot that took him out. It was so quick that if there was a position change, it was probably subtle at most, because it happened so quickly.
Sure.
Right. And I think I was, if I'm thinking back on it, I was probably already kind of getting down during the probably the second burst, right? Because the first burst, the first 2 or 3 would have been, I don't know, seconds, right? 3 seconds, probably less than that. And then at that point, I was just getting down, getting small. And then when there was a stop in the firing, that's when I kind of stood back up and took a look up. And that's when I saw him kind of, again, appear to be pushing himself up, saw pretty much just his face. And then he kind of retreated back below that roof line. And then I saw the hair kind of impact, if you will. So yeah, I can't say that there was a position change, but if there was, it was no more than, inches, if not less than a foot.
How far, when you saw his face, how far would you say, just a rough estimate, how far were you from his position?
20 yards.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. 50, 60 feet.
Yeah, that's crazy. Benjamin Lewis.
And then down low, right? Because he's up on that roof, right? And I'm down low. So it doesn't take much for him to kind of get below my, the line of sight on that roof line.
Sure. Whether or not there was a second shooter, there is physical evidence that has an explanation, and it must be explained before you can assume one shooter. I think the opposite is true. Like literally every bit of evidence, from eyewitness evidence to the fact that we have some decent trajectories, like every bit of evidence points to one shooter. And I think this is such a distraction. Like you have to give us some sort of evidence that says there's 2 shooters. Like, and I just don't see it other than, some sound analysis that says, hey, there's 2 different guns sound different. Folks, I can go out on the range right now and I can shoot some rounds, and then I can point the gun in a different direction and shoot some rounds, and those will definitely sound different. I can shoot the same gun, same ammunition, shoot at a different pace, much faster split times. It's going to sound different. Like, no, if we're going to say there's 2 shooters, we need some really good evidence, because like you're asking me to not believe my own eyes. You're asking Kurt not to believe his own eyes. Like, there's nothing that points to this. We got to get something better if we're going to go. And honestly, folks, I mean this, I would not be surprised at all if it was the state pushing 2 shooters. This entire narrative, I think it's meant to distract. I think it's meant to get everybody up in a tizzy. And I think it's meant to, it's just a distraction so that we don't hold the people that are responsible. There was huge failures by the Secret Service that day. There was huge failures, and mainly at the top level. I don't. You're going to have a hard time convincing me. I'm in the DC area. I've been in this field. My best friend that I've known, we went through the Q course together. I've known him for almost 20 years now. He was an instructor for, Secret Service. He taught the Special Operations Division. Look, these guys at the ground level are like salt of the earth people. And the same thing goes, I think the FBI is wholly corrupt. But I think it's reasonable to assume that most of the agents and the ground level folks are like, just normal people. And I know this for a fact when it comes to, the Secret Service, as far as, the counter sniper teams, their tactical teams, their protective details and things like that. I think those guys, like you're asking a Secret Service counter sniper team, if you think they're in on it, you're asking them, hey, your one job is to prevent X from happening, right? What happened? And you're saying, hey, I need you to fail and look like a complete jackass and let us hold the entire country is going to hate you. But I need you in on this conspiracy for whatever reason. That's hard to buy. We got some other folks out here. Let's see. Kurt, so the AGR lot was unsecured, no metal detectors.
Yeah, I mean, the only security on that lot was a sawhorse and 4 cones, 2 on either side, blocking the driveway entrance. And I could get a Harley Davidson road glide around it. That's a big bike. And I actually drove into that lot twice. The second time I drove in, I parked. First time I drove in was first pass through the area, and I saw that there was nobody along the fence line, at least that I could see at that moment in time. And it just felt odd that this space right close to the fairgrounds area, granted with a fence between it, was empty at that point. So I pulled out, went looking for somewhere else. That's when I went to that Trump swag tent and then noticed the view across the street, across the lot. At that point in time, maybe 15 minutes later from the first entrance of the lot, I then saw people on that fence line, right, watching. And I'm like, wow, that's a good little vantage point, right? There's some trees, some shade. So I drove back out. At that point, had that flag draped over my neck like a cape. But I pulled back into the lot, right? And no cars, no more cars there. There were no cars, just like the first time, but there were a lot of people back there. So that's when I just pulled up in the shade, got off, and his walk-on music was being played. So I knew that he was about to start his speech. And but yeah, back to the question, 0. I mean, and I didn't even see any law enforcement on the perimeter, like walking around the building. I mean, I think if they were, they would have been like, "What are you doing? There's a gate there, or there's a sawhorse there. What, you can't be here. Turn around." Which I would have turned around. I would have tried to park across the street and then walk across to kind of view where others were viewing from. Sure. But no security whatsoever, and that's a shame.
There's been a lot of comments and a lot of questions about. I guess there was a guy out there earlier. I think it's. John from last night was saying that he looked on Google Earth and found his truck in the parking lot of the AGR building. So I'm assuming, it's assumed, I think at this point, that he worked there. But did you see that guy that was trying to get everybody off the property?
No, I didn't. And I saw that recording as well. With that,
like that was like an hour prior to from
yeah,
Dave's
exactly.
timestamp. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think he was supposed to go on at 5:30, and thinking back about when I got home, and I'm about 25 minutes from those fairgrounds where I live. I just I charted it on the map app, and it's like, wow, okay, he's going to get on around 5:30. It was about 5 o'clock. Like I could probably get there just about the time that he starts. I didn't expect I was going to get inside, nor was I going to try. It was just kind of be around the area,
sure,
taking the scene. And that's when I kind of, again, the whole tent thing and seeing what I saw in terms of a good vantage point with easy access in and out. That only then was I sort of resigned to the fact I was going to actually be able to see the actual speech.
Any excuse to take the bike out, right?
Amen. Yeah. It was hot, but at 50 miles an hour, you could cool down.
Yep. Justin Wright says, thank you for the quick instruction on how the 5.56 goes through the parabolic arc during flight. It has made total sense to me. The arcing effect is something I remember as if it was yesterday from Fort Sill. So I covered that yesterday. I talked about, the difference between point of aim versus point of impact. I had a very sophisticated, high-tech freaking chart up that I put together right before the show, but that is true. So, if you're aiming at a target about 150 yards, typically what you're going to see is a point of impact that's going to be 7 to 12 inches higher. So, I think that is what ultimately led to the miss. Even at 140 yards, most people are going to be aiming for a headshot, especially not someone without a magnified optic. So, and there's lots of reasons we as snipers and everybody else, unless we're really close, 100 yards and then, you're typically not going to be aiming for the head because it's a bad idea. The head moves, and sometimes you even turn to look at a chart and it'll completely miss the flight of the bullet. So yeah, I think he was aiming at his chest and it was up by his ear. That's my supposition. Help answer whether anyone heard the female yelling crooks. What are you doing? Get down. A lot of people surmise she was yelling Ross. Try to clarify either way. Got any intel on this, Kurt?
I didn't hear that.
There's all these weird, there's all this weird new stuff that I hear all the time that, and I guess we should expect it, more details to come out, but things like this that seems
a lot of that angle and a lot of that audio and video from that, it seems to be coming from that other side of the building, the opposite side I was on, away from the parking lot. So, and I mean, that's where we've all seen the footage of him sort of, crawling up the roof. It was from that backside where I was definitely on the front side.
This is a comment that is near and dear to my heart because, remember the magic bullet theory that came out suddenly around 2000 for the Kinney situation? Look, I'm going to expose my own tinfoil hat. Look, I think it's 100% in my mind that, Kennedy was killed by elements within our government. That's just my thoughts on it. I've looked into this a lot. I love conspiracy theory. And I'll be honest with you, when I first saw what took place in Butler, the day of, that's immediately where, this looks like Lee Harvey Oswald all over again. I will tell you that. I think ultimately what it ends up being is I think there was some, and look, I am not willing to dismiss the possibility that we had people within our government aid, assist, and possibly even help, crooks. We saw what happened in Michigan with Governor Whitmer. That is a possibility. I don't think a second shooter is a possibility at this point. That's just where I stand on that. And I just want to be honest with everybody. Thanks for that, Camille. We appreciate that. Let's see what other questions we got on here. Normal people don't practice killing. That's true. So where did that comment just go? Somebody just asked, I wonder where the 10th shot came from. This is one thing that I probably need to correct, that I've gotten new information. The real question is, where did the 9th shot come from in my mind? And I still think that it came from local law enforcement. But I wrote in my video, and I was wrong on this, given new information, or I think I was wrong, that I said that the 9th shot, which would have hit him in 5.9 seconds, was from the counter sniper team. Again, I do have some sources inside the Secret Service. You can say that's valid or not, but these aren't, this isn't the high level folks. These are people on the ground. I got confirmation again yesterday. I've heard it before, but got what I feel like is pretty solid confirmation that makes me wrong. That the 10th shot was Secret Service, that they actually took that shot in what comes out to be 15.9 seconds. The information that we got prior to was that shot or the shooter was neutralized by the CS team in under 8 seconds, which put that in the window of the 5.9 second suppressed shot that we hear. I think that's incorrect, and I think they got that timeline wrong. They said they only took one shot, and it was the 10th shot that actually killed him, which lines up with exactly what Kurt is saying, because he's saying he took those 3 shots. He heard another 5. Did you hear that 9th or suppressed shot, Kurt? You remember?
I don't. I really don't. I mean, again, it was just all. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was so close to that 5. It was like those 5-round bursts and then a suppressed shot, and you probably couldn't even tell unless you were listening to the audio. But
yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, what I remember now is a lot different than what I remembered even 2 days ago, right before I started. Before you and I talked, and a mutual friend kind of turned me on to some of your content. I've kind of, my memory has been sort of supplemented, if you will, based
Sure.
on what I've heard and seen. And what I've heard and seen recently is the detail of, sound waves attached to videos that obviously you just don't see anybody putting out there.
Yeah.
And then, the other part is that, I think back on this, and somebody made a comment, or remember where you mentioned it, that, when you talk about that suppressive fire, the last burst, if you will, I mean, that guy could have easily just stood up and, if he just wanted to take out as many people as he could, he wouldn't have been shooting at the crowd. He would have just stood up and just sprayed right across left to right. And that's exactly where, there were about 30, 50 of us right there. And I was, like I said, 5 degrees off his target line. So yeah, I just count myself as lucky and blessed that he decided to just fire a few rounds off into the air above his target, as opposed to getting up and taking some really close shots.
Yeah, and there's also, again, it's speculation, but that he was actually aiming at the counter sniper team that he could see, which would be the southern one to his right. I think there's pretty clear evidence at this point that the northern one, which that building would have fell into their sector, he was obscured, whether that was intentional or luck. He wasn't able to be seen by them because of the tree line that was obscuring him, providing him some concealment there. So the fact is, we don't know what happened to those 5 rounds. I guess the question, probably a better question, is do you feel like that the shooter was taken out within 6 seconds of that first shot, or more like 16 seconds? Because that's where we have those shots.
6.
In about 6 seconds.
Well, again, when you talk about those two choices that you posed, and the question is, taking about around 6 seconds or 16. I mean, that's 10 more seconds.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that in hindsight, that's an eternity, because the time distance between shot 1 and 9, if that was 5 seconds, which I recall from some of your content, that's what it was. That, in my recollection at this point in time, was a long time, right? So adding another double that time, right? More than double that time. Well, I was up and recording by then.
So he shot, you heard those 5 rounds in that second burst. And from there, you saw him start to get up, right?
It was after that second burst, because I mean, I would not have stood up. I mean, again, because it was 6 seconds, first couple of pops, right? I saw the flashes, and then I just kind of got down. And then I'm sure, because of not only the retrospective knowledge of the time it would have been after the 3rd and before the 9th, right? That's 4 seconds. It's not at all outside the realm of reality that I would have been crouched down for 4 to 5 seconds. And then I would not have stood up during a barrage of gunfire, right? I would have stood up after. And now that's your mind saying that's what you do. But I think instinctively I'm going to just take cover and make myself small until I don't hear anything.
Right.
And then I didn't hear something, and I would have stood up And then, again, it's seconds from the moment that I stood up that I saw him kind of come up over the roof line and then retreat over the roof line. I mean, it takes me 8 seconds to describe that, but it happens in 3 seconds. And then again, I saw that puff of his hair when that round came. Well, I'm assuming it came from the stage area.
Yeah, that's interesting. The shooter had copies of multiple books, MK Ultra. Sure. I don't know. Like, we're going to continue to find stuff out. One thing that I haven't looked into, for better or for worse, was, and I've heard explanations of this, but I need to look into it myself. People are talking about all these overseas accounts, and having millions of dollars and things like that in them. I've also heard a good explanation that there was some encrypted, basically some gaming accounts that those are getting confused with. I don't know which one of those is true, but I know there's some questions on that stuff down here in the comments, and I don't have a good answer for you. And I'm not sure, I'm really suspicious when I hear information like that leaked. And again, folks, I genuinely do. I think that there's a real effort to just confuse everybody and to put out a bunch of stuff that can't be confirmed, that when people do start to bring it up, whether it's politicians or people out on the street, it makes us look ridiculous. And I think there's information being seeded into this discussion intentionally, but I could be wrong. Let's see. Last hearing was one of the other questions that's come up is the Chuck Grassley documents that have been released. I got those last night. I've yet to go through those. I plan. Okay, here we go. I'm here to confuse people. You're right, Brian. I'm a CIA operative, and they're paying me. I'll tell you, Kurt. Tax money just spends differently when you get it. Push a message. Let's see this. I'm confused. I have a genuine photo of Crooks having been shot through the neck on the right-hand side of the head, below his ear, entry wound. How can this be if a sniper team 2 from the far roof? I've seen a couple of pictures. I have a picture, and the picture that I have shows a round over his left eye. Look, if I wanted something to go viral, I would produce a picture of supposedly him dead, right? And again, I don't know what people's ambitions or the point of what they're doing out there. I don't know. I don't know which one of those pictures that I've seen going around that are very different. I don't know which one of those are correct. All right. Well, I think that pretty much covers that. We'll continue to pursue this, folks. We'll continue to get more information and try to digest it and give it to you guys as we get it. And I'm going to give you my truthful, honest perspective, not a perspective, that's with the intent of getting extra views or popularity or whatever else. I know the views that I hold aren't necessarily all that popular. I just don't see. I'd be completely lacking integrity if I pushed anything else. That's it. Kurt, you got anything else for us?
No, that's it. It's been a pleasure to be on with you, though, Gary.
No, the same is true. Like I told you, we need to get you down here, do some training with us. We'll get you down here. I know you're only a couple hours away. We know some mutual folks, but we'll get you down here and do some shooting with us. Bring the family. And I can't wait to meet you in person, to be honest with you. So
likewise, yeah. And if you make it up to Butler, right? I heard that reference earlier. Let me know.
Yeah. No, I definitely want to get out there. I'm very interested to see the elevation differences between the roof where Trump would possibly be, and just get a firsthand perspective of some of this stuff. I think this is the importance of this issue and getting to the truth of it can't be understated. And I do think that I think we need to do a great job of doing our best to hold government accountable. I'm concerned that there's information out there that is meant to confuse people and distract people. So, that's kind of where I'm at on some of this stuff. Well, Kurt, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You have my cell phone number. If you have any other new information, you remember anything else, or you just want to come on and talk, make sure you reach out. But we'll definitely be getting up your way, but we'll definitely get you guys down here to do some training with us and have some fun.
Look forward to all that.
Awesome. Well, folks, look, we really appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you have some new information that you didn't have before, a new perspective. Look, I want you guys to continue looking for the truth. If you have new information or anything like that, you can go to our website, ParamountTactical.com. Our email is there. Send us an email. I'll happily look over that. If there's any audio engineers out there that want to discuss this, that we can take a real educated and approach to this, that maybe you can educate me and tell me why I'm wrong, or I just want somebody that really knows what they're doing to discuss this that's truly objective on that. But I really appreciate you coming on, Kurt, and stay there. I'll shut this down. We'll talk a little bit afterwards. But everybody else, make sure you guys are tuning in at 3 p.m. I'll get it up on our channel, but I know it's already up on Peak Prosperity's channel. We'll be doing a live stream with Chris Martinson. And it's going to be a good time. And stay tuned. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, that bell icon, all those things. We're going to do our best to keep you as informed and to bring you as much truth as possible. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.